Welcome to Digital Stratosphere, the podcast on all things technology agnostic and independent. Today, we are discussing project leadership in digital transformation, and I am joined by Adam Cheatham, Director of Digital Transformation Strategy here at Third Stage Consulting Group. I'm Kyler Cheatham, your host today, and Adam, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me again.
Absolutely. Well, we're really excited, to dig into this project side, and I want to take it from a few different lenses when we talk about how you structure a client's internal leadership team, and then also how you support on the actual third-party consulting side when it comes to things like vendor management. So can you give us just a baseline to start out about what a project leadership structure should look like for your clients?
Yes. So a couple of things come to mind when I hear the question, what is project leadership structure? And the first thing that comes to mind is that leaders come in all shapes and sizes at all different places in the organization. So what you really want is a project structure full of leadership. And it starts at the top and it kind of rolls its way down, where you have a steering committee that everybody involved in a digital transformation project is accountable to. You also have a project sponsor who is accountable to the steering committee, and the project sponsor becomes the single executive level lead on the project itself. This person is usually the one that's the closest to the project by nature. In an ERP implementation, for example, depending on the organization, this could be a CIO, this could be a CFO, it could be a COO, just depending on what it is you're trying to get out of this project. And this sponsor tends to be a part of the steering committee as well. This person's role generally tends to be the conduit between the executive leadership and the project team itself. Project team should have a number of different roles on it. Number one role is going to be program management, however you want to title it. There may be multiple people fulfilling this role depending on the complexity of your project, but what you're looking for is somebody who can facilitate the completion of project activities in this space. You'll likely have a project manager from your software vendor. You'll likely have a project manager internally, and you may have other project managers depending on how many other vendors are involved, at which point we start to think about program management, which is that leadership position that helps make sure all the projects are playing nice together. And then the last role that's worth talking about in a leadership position from a project structure that's common is the project core team. That is usually a group of subject matter experts who will be dedicated to the project itself. What you're looking for in a good core team member is leadership qualities across a multitude of functional areas. In a full-blown ERP implementation, we're looking at finance, we're looking at production planning, demand planning, and MRP. Sales is usually involved, of course, customer service. Depending on how many functional areas you're covering in scope, you should have a core team member who can stand in place in each of those areas to make decisions along the way throughout the implementation and the project itself. They should also be somebody who knows the other people in the organization, the subject matter experts, to say, hey, we need Jimmy for this conversation because he's the one that does that every day. At the core team level, you're looking for folks that are considered leaders in your organization. This is one of the harder decisions to make in an ERP implementation, because those are usually some of your best people who are indisposable in their roles. And what we're asking to do is to remove them from those roles and put them in a different position. People usually look to those kinds of folks for coaching opportunities. Hey, what do I do here? What do I do there? And you're looking for a positivity in that. I like to also recommend one other leadership role, which is change agent. and you're looking for leaders in the organization that can convey a positive message about how the project is going, what the purpose is, and engage the rest of the organization who may not be directly involved, so that they know what's going on, how the change is going to happen, those types of things. So leadership happens at a lot of different levels within a successful digital transformation.
Absolutely. And that was a lot of really great information. So, if you don't mind, let's unpack it just a little bit. So, can you kind of differentiate the steering committee that you mentioned and their roles and responsibilities, or who might be an example of who would sit on that committee within the organization? And then maybe compare that to the ERP core team. How are they different and how
Yeah.
do they collaborate?
So your steering committee is all top level executives, at least in a typical ERP implementation, and that's appropriate. Your CEO, COO, CFO, CIO, those that C-suite is very often the steering committee. You may also, depending on titles within your organization, have more like department heads, directors, vice presidents, whatever their title is. You're looking for the executive leadership in the functional areas that are going to be impacted by your implementation. So when somebody goes and talks to them and says, "Hey, this somebody on this project team wants me to start spending 20 hours a week on this. That sounds ridiculous." Um, that steering committee sponsor or steering committee member can say, "Actually, that is what I want you to do. I want you to spend 20 hours a week on it because it's that important to us." It's that type of a person and decision making position that is what we look for in a steering committee member. Um, Ultimately, what happens at the steering committee level is you have the major project decisions that are made by this committee. Um, should we customize this software system? Should we add scope and budget to this ERP implementation? Do we need to bring on a third party for this or for that? Um, those types of questions. And then the most important question of all, which is your go no go decision. Are we going to go live? We're ready. Everybody says we're ready. Here's what they said the risks are. That should be a steering committee decision that's made in a joint fashion to say, all right, we all feel comfortable with this. Let's do it.
And then when it comes to the ERP core team, it sounds like they're more on the execution level as opposed to the decision making as around strategy.
That's exactly right. So these are folks that are living and breathing this stuff operationally day in and day out. They know what it looks like on the floor. They know what it looks like in the office, and all of the operational things that will be coded into and configured in your ERP system. They'll be heavily involved in facilitating the design and the configuration of the system.
And would those only be, say, IT folks, or what would that look like as far as the different stakeholders involved in that conversation?
That's another great question. They would be from the business side. We uh, heavily recommend your core team not be staffed entirely by IT folks. It's not uncommon for especially larger organizations to have a team of business analysts in IT who are responsible for each functional area. These are not the people you want on your ERP core team. You
Mm.
want the people who are actually doing the jobs. The people that your IT business analysts are going to go ask all of the important questions to. We want those people on your core team because this is a business project. This is a business transformation, and the decisions that impact the scope and nature of the project should be made at the business side of things.
So these stakeholders not only sound like subject matter experts, but also leaders. And it seems like if you're an organization going through any sort of technology implementation, that might kind of hurt to take those people out of their day to day operations. So, how do you kind of move through that transition without any huge disruption for the overall business?
Uh, you just kind of have to take it one step at a time. Mostly, what we like to recommend is backfilling those roles so that the people who are you're going to lift out of the organization and put into this project have the space and time to do it. You also want to get really, really refined on how you're scoping the number of hours you need a week from them. And your system integrator and other third-party partners like Third Stage can help walk you through what that looks like. Whereas it's an eyes wide open conversation on how much time do we need of each individual core team member, and at which points in time, because sometimes that's heavy, sometimes it's lighter, and it can vary by functional area. So talking through it, knowing what that is, and thinking of it about in a lot of ways as a role as opposed to a person. Like I need a finance core team member. That's a role,
Mhm.
not necessarily an individual person. So you might split it, right? You might have, the payable side and the receivable side. You might
Mhm.
have the two of them, to minimize the impact. You do want to be careful not to have too big of a core team. Most organizations, 6 to 8 is the right number of people for that. So you don't want to get too big and have too many cooks in the kitchen, but at the same time, you want to be able to, provide some flexibility for the people that matter most to your organization.
And that's all excellent advice. What is some red flags or some mistakes you've seen that organizations that you've worked with have gone through when setting up their project leadership team that could be avoided?
The first is having a core team that's too big. I've worked with core teams of 12 to 16 people, and they're just paralyzed by inactivity. Everybody wants to make a decision for their functional area, and you stop seeing things as holistic and you start seeing them in silos, which very quickly devolves into um, combat situations like us versus them type of mentality. And that's not productive, and it's not indicative of good leadership. Um, Other things that we fall into is not having the right people. Is to say that our most important people must remain in their chairs and put somebody else that would be less than desirable in the core team project not only waters down the impact of the project itself. It makes it seem like it's, if you can't put your best people on it, it must not be that important. But it also puts you in a decision where somebody's gonna be responsible for making decisions for your most valuable people, and those most valuable people may disagree with that path because they know more about what happens on the inside and outside. So having the right people, and really dedicating to putting the right people on the team is another key component of that. The last thing is, for a third thing that is a common mistake in the core team, at least as I see it, is just saying, well, that person's already working 40 hours a week and we're going to do this implementation project. So now I'm going to ask them to work 60.
Mm.
That type of hero mentality that is, let's pile on our best people. An ERP implementation shouldn't become a punishment for good work. And it will be seen as that if you just pile it on, because implementations are hard. They take a lot of time and thought. And the last thing you want is the 20 hours or a week or whatever it is you need from that core team member to be the least efficient 20 hours of their week, because their hours 41 through 60, as opposed to having an opportunity to really dedicate themselves to the project.
I'm sure that's a really relevant piece of advice right now as we go through kind of this great reshuffle and our labor market is challenged.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, we're going to take a quick break. And then when we come back, I'm going to ask Adam some questions about how third stage or third party vendors and partners help support that leadership team.
If you are involved in any sort of digital transformation or business change initiative, you will want to download the 2021 Digital Transformation Report. With its comprehensive overview of business and technology trends and best practices, this report is a must-have guide for any transformation project or executive team. Download this free report by visiting Third Stage Consulting at thirdstage-consulting.com. You can also visit our website to learn more about us or download independent reports, videos, and other best practices. Again, visit thirdstage-consulting.com today to learn how to take your transformation to the third stage of success.
Welcome back to Digital Stratosphere, the podcast on all things technology agnostic. I'm Kyler Cheatham, here talking with Adam Cheatham regarding leadership and digital transformation. So in the first part of the episode, we covered kind of the internal structure of what we advise our clients to kind of arm their leadership team or structure it. So now I kind of want to dig into how Third Stage and other vendors, software vendors, system integrators, all those types of partners fit into that project leadership team. So Adam, welcome back, first of all.
Of course.
So when you are going into this conversation about how do you structure your leadership team with your clients, where does Third Stage fit into that?
That's it's an important thing to think about. The way that I always like to frame it is implementations are a lot of work and they have a lot of jobs that need to get done. And that simply is fact. Where Third Stage fits in is when that list of jobs is longer than the client is capable of handling themselves. It's program management, for example, managing all of your vendors together so that they're all on the same program plan and you have a consolidated plan for the whole ERP implementation. That's a really difficult task. You got to manage your ERP vendor and anybody else that integrates with them, including your IT teams and the existing software. And your ERP vendor is only going to focus on ERP and whatever it is they signed up for. All the other stuff that happens outside of that is your responsibility. And that's a job that needs to get done. So program management and handling all those third-party vendors in conjunction with your ERP provider is a role that needs to happen. We like that role from an independent perspective because it creates a lens of how do I know when this is just hard versus something is wrong, and having an experienced partner in that space we find is really valuable and prevents a lot of heartache later on in the project for being able to say, yeah, that's normal. I realize that it's not what you wanted to hear. But that's normal, and it's going to take a lot of work, and we're going to get through that, and that's fine. Versus what isn't normal, and being able to confidently make good, strong decisions quickly when necessary is difficult to see from the inside out. So an independent third party like a Third Stage is capable of being able to tell the difference between what's hard and what's wrong and be able to counsel you through those types of things.
So do you ever experience clients that haven't done that at the beginning of the project and have to engage a partner like Third Stage in the middle of their implementation or even after a failed implementation?
Remediation projects are always very difficult and very specific to each individual client and their experience through it. We do quite a lot of this. The hardest part is figuring out where are we and how do we get back on track, and then setting an expectation that we've made a move in that direction. Regression to prior habits is a problem in remediation types of projects where we're back on track for now. But the prevailing winds from a change management perspective are, here we go again. They started up that ERP project again. Now that I'm going to get meetings all over my calendar for the next couple of weeks, but I don't need to worry about that or really attend them because it's going to go away again anyway. That's a really hard thing to confront in a remediation effort. And we want to make sure that we're understanding what type of an impact change management has for those types of projects, because it becomes even more important to double down on that to avoid failing either again because you did already, or avoid failing altogether because that's the direction that you're currently headed in. So it's from a leadership perspective, this is where that change agent role that I talked about earlier can come in and become really effective. It's not Not typically a role that all system integrators call out as important in an implementation, but it can be quite useful, especially as you're trying to put things back on track.
And speaking of system integrators and software vendors, where do they fit in the project leadership structure, and how should they be viewed in going through any sort of digital transformation?
I from a software vendor and frankly from an independent third party firm like Third Stage is concerned, they should be considered as extensions of your team that report to your project sponsor. You sign a services contract with these types of organizations. That means they work for you. Um, you also have to understand, though, that from a leadership perspective, their leadership goals are different than yours. Your leadership goals are to create this new digital environment that allows you to achieve all kinds of great benefits and efficiencies and all of that. So we can put our business in a more on a more modern footing. The system integrators' leadership goals are get the software up and running and maximize revenue. Uh,
Mhm.
that revenue comes out of your pocket. That's their job. And from a third stage perspective, while of course we do, we are a professional services organization, our role tends to be more from a perspective of being able to say what is appropriate decision making and
Mhm.
what isn't, and be able to coach and guide through those types of conversations so that those conflicts of interests on the vendor and integrator side are minimized.